Garlic is a great addition to any home garden, and depending on the variety that you grow, can be kept in storage for up to a year. Today, I'm going to show you a few cues to look for as to the proper time to harvest your garlic, and then some tips on how to cure and store garlic for long-term storage. Let's jump in. In my area, which is zone 6A, I'm in Ohio, I typically will harvest garlic about mid-July, and that's from a mid-October planting. Now, your planting and harvest times are going to vary a little depending on where you're growing, but typically garlic is going to be harvested about 8 to 9 months after planting if you do a fall planting for spring harvest. The first cue that you're going to want to look for to indicate that your garlic is ready for harvest is that about 50 to 75% of the foliage has started to brown down and dry out. Very similar to onions, this is going to indicate that the foliage is no longer feeding the roots and that growth has essentially stopped on your garlic bulbs. It's around this time that you'll want to stop watering your garlic. I know you can't control the rains, but if you're irrigating or watering, 1 to 2 weeks before harvest is a good time to stop because you essentially want your garlic to get a head start on drying down before the harvest. When you see the leaves start to dry down, you can do kind of a test dig to check on the size of your bulbs. So if you don't want to actually dig a bulb up and look at it, you can lightly dig the earth around the bulb without unearthing it. You'll want to check that the bulb has sufficient size, that the wrappers are tight, and that the cloves are plump and well formed. If your test bulb meets all of this criteria, it's a good indicator that you can go ahead and dig the rest of your planting. If it doesn't, just go ahead and wait a couple days to a week to check again before digging up your harvest. When you're ready to harvest, gently loosen around the bulbs with a small shovel or a trowel, and then firmly gripping the bulb by the base of the stem, gently pull them out of the ground. At this point, you can brush off any loose dirt that are on the bulbs and roots, but you don't have to clean the bulb entirely. Now you can go ahead and cure your garlic. Now, garlic does not have to be cured. You can use it fresh out of the garden, but garlic tends to improve in flavor as it ages, and the curing process will help it store for a longer term. You will want to use any bulbs that have been damaged. Say you nicked one with a shovel or something like that. Use those bulbs first. For curing, you'll want to lay the bulbs in a single layer in a well-ventilated area that is shaded. A covered porch, a barn or garage that has good air movement, under a tree if there's no rain in the forecast, anything like that. Anything that's going to be shaded, good air movement, dry is a good place to cure your garlic. I typically like to lay mine out on a screen or a pallet. This year we laid it out on a trailer because we had so much that we didn't have room for it otherwise. And if you're short on surface space, you can always tie them in loose clumps or soft necks you can braid and hang up in a similar area to dry. The main things to keep in mind is that you don't want them to get wet, you do not want to expose them to direct sunlight, and you don't want to cut the stems off yet. Now, the curing process can take as little as 2 weeks to up to 2 months, and this is totally dependent on your environment. If you live in a very dry, like low humidity, warm climate, curing is going to go very quickly. If you live in a damp, humid environment or you're getting a lot of rain, it will take much longer. But ideally, you're going to want to keep it warm, about 80 degrees if possible, and dry. And again, with good air circulation. So some folks even like to put a fan on their garlic or in the space where they've got their garlic curing to keep that air movement going. When the curing process is done, you will notice that the roots are dried and shriveled and that the stems are completely brown and dried up. And at this point, once the curing is done and the garlic is totally dried up, you can trim off the stems, trim off the roots, brush off any remaining dirt, even removing the first layer or so of the bulb. You just don't want to remove too many layers of skin because that's going to provide the protective layer to keep them good in storage. And then you're going to want to store in a breathable container. So mesh bags, people use pantyhose, a wicker basket, a crate with air openings, anything like that. Anything that's going to, again, provide air circulation. And then you're going to want to store those in a cool, dark space. So the optimal conditions for at-home garlic storage are temperatures of around 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit, about 50 to 60% humidity, and low to no light. And depending on the type of garlic that you've grown, as I mentioned in the beginning, your garlic can store this way for up to a year. So I hope that you're enjoying your own homegrown garlic. And if you find content like this helpful, please consider subscribing to my channel, Growfully with Jenna. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.